Right. Okay, sitting back then. Making yourself comfortable, feet out a little bit to encourage this feeling of just encourage this feeling of dropping back. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. And take a few moments just to sort of scan through your body. The body scan is a very useful tool. It's very simple. It's not, you're not trying to change anything. And so, I mean, in Tai Chi, obviously we do at some point, but a good starting point is just to notice what is there. So, you know, regardless of whether it's comfortable or whether it was tight, just sort of start off with an awareness of your feet. Maybe feel a little bit of weight in your heels. Feel whether the feet are at a comfortable angle or not. Just allowing your attention to pan slowly up through your body. So your shins and your calves, and your knees. Notice if there's a little bit of a bend in your knees, a bit of a softening there. Carrying on through the thighs and hips, and just this feeling of more of your weight there, obviously. Noticing whatever there is to notice, even if it's a bit uncomfortable, just acknowledging that. Going up your back, and there's probably quite a lot of weight, quite a lot of your weight pushing you back into the chair, and so, you know, notice where the contact with the chair is, how that feels. Your feet, your hips, your back, along with the chair all supporting you. And then the front of your body, belly, solar plexus, and chest and ribs, just softening a little bit. Maybe aware of a bit of movement with your breathing. If you can feel that, then maybe, you know, see how far you can feel it, where you can feel it. Is it just in your chest? Is it a little bit down in your belly, somewhere in between? What the effect of that might be on the tissues, organs within your body. Your arms are just resting, and you can feel the weight of your arms, wherever they're resting. You might have them on your belly or something like that, wherever they're comfortable. And then your head resting on top of your shoulders. Try not to hold any expression, or notice whether you are holding any expression. Maybe your jaw a bit tight or something like that. So this helps to just settle your attention into your body. And last week I talked at times about this, referring back to this feel in Tai Chi. There's a technical side to what we do, but also this memory of a quality, a sense, a feel, a taste, a smell, however you label it, that is a little bit abstract and not necessarily directly related to exactly where your shoulders are, but more that sense of what you can feel at least some of the time when you're doing Tai Chi. And try and think of the memory of that as being it's been another image that you can use. We use a great many images, you know, the birds flying and bears and so on and so forth. And they've all got interesting aspects to them. But seeing that memory of how it feels in Tai Chi as an image in itself, as a way of encouraging the body into that position, into that state, it's a very direct thing, because there's nothing in between. With any of the other images, you have to eventually need to leave the image behind to experience the movement. But this can take you directly into the movement. It's a little bit trickier because it's a bit more vague. But we draw on our own experience to give it some kind of shape. And then as with other images, you have that shape there with a sense that your body and probably your mind as well can sort of flow into that. And then bring the feet in. This also relates to that idea of cultivation. We start off with a sense of this is where we are, regardless of whether we think it's good, bad, or indifferent. And then we have some kind of idea, some kind of image of where we would like to be. And, if you want to go somewhere, you have to work out where your starting point is. So this, that memory is shaped, as I said, that you want to let your body flow into, that you want to cultivate, not push. I sometimes use the word programming, but even that's a bit of a hard term. You're not forcing your body, you're not using your mind to dictate to the body, but rather in the sense of them blending and working in partnership. And that's all. You're not trying to do, when you do that, it's just that. You don't think, therefore I need to do this with my shoulder or something like that. There might be a point where you think that, or adjust your feet or something like that, but just feeling if there is any change and kind of encouraging that change a little bit with the memory. So this is another thing that we can come back to while we're moving. And it's quite difficult. It's quite a sort of, in some ways, it's quite an advanced state of mind training, I think, to actually be able to maintain a sort of abstract image like that for any length of time, or even for a short time. And then just turning your head, and you can come back to that memory at any point just to remind yourself. I'm not suggesting that you struggle to hold it there. When you do feel yourself drifting away from it, and that pull is quite strong, that's when we would redirect into something different. You may think, well, maybe aware of your hips sinking down, something a bit more technical, a bit more concrete, or maybe the image of moving through water or something like that. Whatever seems appropriate at the moment. So all of these things become tools that we bring into play. That they can all be useful, used appropriately. And then the shoulders. Then forwards. And down to your sides. Excuse me. See if you can feel the response in your chest and your ribs and in your upper back between your shoulder blades. And as you do, just trying to take more note of that, trying to, in a way, make that more of a primal movement. So rather than your arms rotating, causing your chest to expand and contract, and just see if you can, again, imagine the chest expanding and contracting. Don't try and do it. If you try and make it happen physically, then you'll start doing this. And I know sometimes I do that to demonstrate what is going on, but it's too big, it's too long, it's wrong to do that. Too obvious a movement. It needs to be a little bit more organic than that. And winding around. And back the other way. Resting your hands, transferring your weight, from hips to feet and back again. Imagine doing this in water. That's one of the images that is actually very straightforward again, because it's very simple and we can really build the sense of what's happening in our body when we make use of that image. And we're going to use your legs to push yourself back up, but also feel that opposite movement of your hips dropping back. So try not to get too front orientated in the movements that you make. We naturally think in terms of the front of the body. So if I were to say to you, turn left, it will turn your body to the left, to turn the front of your body to the left. But in fact, the rear of your body would be going to the right, wouldn't it? So that's a useful perspective. It rounds off our picture of the body that we're exploring, and also helps to develop these counteracting movements, because if we're aware of the hips, we're aware of the pull on the hips and how far we can go before we just naturally come back without that clash, without that tightening. Turning a little bit, so now it's as though you're trying to take the head down to one knee. You won't get that far, I don't suppose. I don't get anywhere near it, but that's the pathway you're going on. It gives you a chance to focus a little bit more on one of the legs, and feeling that sense that as your weight goes in, the leg is compressed and then it pushes you back. And same thing as you go into your hips and lower back, and you push you forwards. Try on the other side. You may find that you have a better, clearer image on one side than another. And then going round in a small circle, using the capacity of your pelvis to just roll around a little bit. Remember, the hip joints, the pelvis itself, very mobile area of the body. Potentially, we hope it's mobile. So you can feel the movement of your weight around that small circle from one hip to another, forwards a little bit, and so on. go in the other direction. Good, and then raising one foot, one heel, and step forwards, pull back. Okay, and then on the other side. Okay, and then just come to rest. Letting your hands drop down to your sides, turn the palms forwards, bird folds its wings. Another thing you can do, and kind of similar to what I was talking about, but it's just to that sense of the feel of the Tai Chi that I was talking about, not just inside of you, but in that area around you, in the area that will be defined by where your feet are, where your hips are, where your arms are, so that the movement doesn't stop at the borders of your skin, shall we say. Then change into fisherman castanet. Weight stops moving in the same place because your arms are now hanging down. You'll swing out just a little bit. That's partly because there's a bit of extra momentum that builds. You're allowing your arms to swing. It's like anything. If you get a conch on a piece of string and just tap it, it will swing. Eventually, that movement would die down, of course. But in the case of these exercises, each time you finish to transfer the weight, once again, there's that little bit of a compression. And imagine doing this on a, if you're able to do this on a trampoline or something like that. And somebody pointed out in one of my classes last week, I was talking about this. They said, if you're on a trampoline or a bouncy castle or something, you would feel that there was a push before you got lifted up. I think that's quite interesting because it encourages an attitude that you're going to wait here, not just push back, but you're going to wait until you feel the push back. It's a very natural response. And at first it feels quite awkward. It will break the flow of the movement, but you'll soon get that back because you'll be able to pick it up earlier and earlier, like a surfer picking up a wave as it comes into the beach. And coming over. time we're going to change. The pigeon spreads its wings. Again, with this one, it really emphasizes this opening and closing in the front and back of your upper body. So if you are looking to do in breathing patterns occasionally with these movements, this is probably a good one, because as we do this, we get that feeling of expansion up through the body. There's a natural in-breath there for most of us. That's natural is the wrong term, but automatic in-breath there. So I would suggest, if you're looking to build a breathing pattern, then just breathe in here deliberately every now and then. Don't do it all the time, just to remind the body what it is you're trying to achieve, and be patient with that process. Do one more. And then hands staying low in front of your hip, but your elbows coming out still. Pushing away. Pushing the boat. Remember, we are still moving backwards. So from the side, it's a bit awkward. So please don't laugh if I pull off the chair. But here, I settle back. I don't just go straight forward. I sort of settle down, and I get that sort of feeling. I'm not saying it's that big a movement at all, but then I can feel the push, and that takes me forward. And what you might also see from this direction, right? Again, I am exaggerating this. Really don't force this. It could be damaging for your back, but it's the feeling. It's sort of the feeling in the energy is that my back bows like a bow and arrow, and so when the push comes, the weight goes forward, but also there's that feeling there. Now, as I say, that was way too big. You wouldn't expect to see that. You might feel it a little bit if you could put your hand on somebody's back while they were doing this, but even then it will be very, very subtle. You're not really bringing the back out of line. So it's like a kind of pulsing, energetic quality as much as anything else. But I mean that there's one aspect of this that makes it work a bit like a bow and arrow. You know, when you draw a bow and arrow, the bow curves, and it's said to store the energy. And our backs have the same kind of capacity. One more time. And again, it's not going to be with just this movement. Once you've noticed something like that, you may notice it in lots of other contexts as we go through the session. And I think this is a very common experience. A couple of years ago, one of my teachers, they showed an exercise that stimulated the kind of feeling of expansion in the side. And it's kind of grabbed my attention. I practiced the exercise, and then I realized that I was noticing this expansion all the time. It's just in lots of different exercises and in the forms and things like that. I couldn't kind of get it out of my mind. I think that's quite a natural thing, that you notice something and then it's right at the front of your awareness. It gradually settles back. Something else will take its place. And at that point, it becomes a much more organic part of how you're moving. Do one more of these. And then turn into your left and drawing back and around, polishing the table, change direction. And again, we need to take note of what's happening in your lower back, hips, and buttocks, where your spine goes into your pelvis. Notice the counteracting movement, which will be initially, to the left or to the right, to the opposite of the way that your hands are going. But will gradually you'll realize that not only is it going left or right, but there's also that responsiveness to the pull of gravity, the strong downward pull. And that's something to really pay attention to. One more on each side, each direction. And then under here and push it up. Then change into the wild goose. And part in the clouds. Now go back to rooting down, and we'll do the little sequence of these three movements this time. And just pay attention to the expansion and the contraction. I think by its very nature, when we do the first one, we feel mostly the expansion and contraction in the belly. When we go into the second, the wild goose, we feel it in the belly, but then a little bit higher up across the solar plexus, the lower part of the chest. And then with part in the clouds, belly, solar plexus, but then higher up, upper part of the chest, head and shoulders. That's a process that matches the progression of the movement of our breathing, as I've gone through before. It also draws your attention in very loose terms, not very precise, the three areas of the body that are sometimes referred to as the three dantians, lower, middle, and upper. And they're sort of energy centers, I suppose you could call them. That's not quite the right interpretation. A sea of energy, dantian is sometimes translated as. Excuse me. And they in Chinese energetics, they represent different states of the energy. Somebody once described those different states as being like the different states of water that in the belly it's not solid, but it's thicker, I suppose you could say. And then when we come to the middle dantian, I beg your pardon here, more like water. And then here, more like steam or water vapor. So the movements have that slightly different feel. And yeah, harmonizing the three dantians or balancing the three dantians. Really trying to get a sense of the transition from one to another. Make it very smooth, not an abrupt transition. So I'm not trying to say this is, don't think of these as hard and fast parts of the body. They sort of blend in with each other. But in Chinese medicine, those areas are sometimes referred to as the triple heater. And it's regarded as an organ in some ways, but it's not really an organ, but it's rather seen as those parts of the body that are concerned with regulation, with harmonizing movements, the various processes in the body working together, the hormones and various other endocrine system and so on and so forth. So it's seen as being a part of the body that is very regulatory. I think this exercise can kind of reflect that. Very harmonizing. Some versions of this exercise are a little bit more complex, but I've chosen to do it like this because this is three exercises that you're familiar with. So you don't need to learn anything new. You can focus on those internal sensations. And we'll make this the last run through. But of course, that progression from lower down in your body upwards is the same progression that we would feel here as we go into dragon plucks the stars from the sky or any of the movements. So you might even want to extend that thing of the lower dantian, the center down into your feet. There's that little bit of a push down. You don't want to go too far down the route of separating out parts of the body and saying this is this and that is that. It's not quite so straightforward. And to get too rigidly into that doesn't help you to maintain that quality, that feel of the movement. Now, both hands together, pushing in two directions. This time adding the turning. Again, I've talked before about that progression of the turn. You could think of that in terms of those 3 dantians, one turning on top of the other, not straining in the shoulders, feeling like a spiral upward, like a tornado coming up from the ground. A little bit of extra turn at each level that you choose to focus on. One more round. So now this time, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Again, your foot extended, knee soft, curved, and very useful with this exercise to think of that back of your body, the hips sinking back as your head goes forward. So it gives you several things. One is the lengthening in your spine, not a stretch, but a lengthening. Another, of course, is just with your hips going back, when that lengthening reaches as far as it can go without straining, without stiffening up, there's a natural point where you withdraw. One more time. And now, when you change the grasp in the tiger's ears, the hands fist, you sink in to your hips at the back of the chair, push yourself forwards, and let that movement draw your arms over. So this can be quite a difficult movement, getting your arms to curve around smoothly and straining the shoulders. But again, if I exaggerate, you can see how my chest is coming forward. And then so that same opening and closing in your chest. Again, let me demonstrate from the side here. A bit difficult actually here, but there it's like this happens, and then it withdraws, and that happens. So it's got that kind of feel about it. Again, that is wildly exaggerated. If you want to really appreciate the subtlety of those movements, go back to something like bird folds its wings, for instance, because you shouldn't be able to see them. They're undercurrents of movement. But as they build up, as your awareness of them builds up, it really helps to move your arms. Now change over. So have your other foot forward, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Here, of course, it's the other way around. This is where the chest opens, and that helps to push your arms back. So again, that shouldn't be a strain to bring your hands over. Yeah. I get to there, and then I do this. Okay, that's way too far. I'm not going to do that too often. That would strain my back. These are movements that I felt, not seen. And then hands fisted, grasping the tiger's ears. Bring your feet parallel. Just think about these hidden movements, or however you want to think about them. Some people talk about secret techniques, but there's nothing. They're not secret. They're just very well hidden. They're deeply buried. I remember once in a seminar with Grandmaster Chen Xiaowang, and he was doing a movement. He was standing, but he appeared just to be moving his arm. And I was thinking, well, this is a swizz, isn't it? You know, he's a grandmaster. We're always told move your body and so on and so forth. But I went a bit closer. I got close enough to see that actually there were tiny little changes taking place that you couldn't see very well. And sometimes a teacher will kind of, they're going to put your hand on their back or something like that, and you can feel them. It's a bit like if you've ever been up to a pond or maybe even a rock pool on the beach on a very calm day. And the surface of the water is very still. Then you look down into the water and you can see little movements, little currents moving. They're like sort of deeply buried in a way. And those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. Tells you to look at. Rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. Upper part of your chest. Belly. And your legs. And stand. So these are areas where mind and body really interact. And once you've started to notice these things, then they build. I mean, as you know, I like to go bird watching, and sometimes I'll just, if I come across that still pond or something like that, if I can get in the shade so there's no reflection, you can use binoculars to see deeply down, and you can sort of see beneath the surface. And as soon as you do that, you suddenly notice there's a great deal more going on. And in a sense, your mind is a bit like the pair of binoculars. That's the thing that magnifies what's going on. They're there anyway. You're not creating them, but once you've noticed them, you can build on them. So just standing, and again, you know, this image, this memory of how it can feel in Tai Chi, maybe something you want to just have in front of you as a shape. It becomes in and of itself one of the images that we use. The memory is a very direct image, as I said. And let's go straight into the three-part sequence. So we'll do rooting down, wild goose, and parting the clouds in a sequence. So you'll pick it up soon enough. So again, harmonizing the three tensions, if you like to think of it like that. So let your hips sink back. Just to remind you of the sequence. Rooting down. Take your time when you reach the changeover point. Wild goose. And then parting the clouds. Sinking down, so using your legs, feeling the downward movement through your feet and through your hips, even as you're pushing up. And another little thing you can add, not for the first one as a rule. You do the first one with your feet flat on the ground, but then only do this if it's comfortable. As you go into the wild goose, you roll your weight forward, so your heels just come off the ground. It's not really standing on tiptoe, it's that rolling forwards, and then do the same thing for part in the clouds. Just that little bit of extra lift, extra lengthening through your back when you can do that. But if that's making you sort of struggle, then don't do it. It's just something to add in when it feels right to add in. Let's do one more round. And then shake out. Walk forwards, transferring your weight. And last week when we did that little dropping down into the foot. Well, you can do that. You can do it with a little bit of up and down movement to begin with, if you wish. Ultimately, though, ideally we will keep our shoulders and our hips fairly level, not rigidly so, so that all of the energy goes into the horizontal movement. But when we come to moving the foot, when we come to raising toes and heel, it might help me just to get that little bit of extra dropping down. What I refer to sometimes as the seesaw effect. It's almost like, again, this is exaggerated, I drop downward. When I drop downward, you can see how my heel comes up. I go back. When I drop down, it's like, oh, look, it's that. Again, it's more a feeling within your hips and your lower back, this kind of draining away. And then stepping in. On the other side. and then raising your toes and your heel. Stepping in. And take some full steps. Change direction if you haven't done so already. So we'll do bird folds its wings and fisherman cast the net. So here, when we do bird folds its wings, you can see that my hands stay beside my hip. I'm not going forwards or backwards a little bit. But again, if I exaggerate here, I've got that movement. Can you see what's happening when I rotate my arms? But I'm really pushing my sternum out. And then when I go forwards, it draws in. Now, when I stop rotating my arms, the same thing happens. I get to here, and there's a little bit of momentum, and then that. You see how my arms have gone back, and then I go forwards, my arms swing through, and then that. So again, rather exaggerated, but hopefully giving you some idea of the feeling. So first of all, bird folds its wings. This is a really good exercise for just feeling that connection between the rotation of your arms and what's happening in chest and upper back, elsewhere as well probably, but that's best to focus on chest and upper back if you're comfortable with that. And then this time, go forwards and make the change to fisherman cast the net. So this becomes a very smooth feeling in your shoulders. As you can see, there's lots of movement there, almost like the shoulders being massaged from the inside. And then on the other side, bird folds its wings. And fisherman cast the net. and bring the feet down. Okay, go back to your chairs. We can apply the same ideas, the same awareness to all the exercises. And we do that with Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain. It's a way of just discovering those things that help us to come back to the mountain without having to make dramatic gestures. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing the exercise in full, but you know, just standing in the supermarket queue, or you know, we're approaching that busy time of the year, aren't we? You know, family and so on and so forth. You can't always go up and do some Tai Chi. It's not always appropriate. It's not always there. But what you can do is have a sense of how in your body those processes work. So we're going to do Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain. But each time you go through the sequence, try and do it a little bit smaller from the outside, and see if that helps you just to get a greater sense of what's happening within the body, so that eventually you'll come to rest, but maybe still feeling things happening within your body. So start off with the normal exercise. Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain. Just arms not going out so much, not going quite so high. So there's hardly any movement there at all. Again, it's almost, you almost get to the point where there's just the memory of the movement and the effect it has. And you're just letting your hands come to rest. And just open your eyes. Lovely, thank you very much. So, almost hidden movement there. Well, we won't tell anybody, we'll keep it ourselves.